This
Very good.
conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so thank you for joining us. My name is David Liedle. I work with developer relations. I've been a developer for over 20 years, and it's something that I love. And I'm going to clear my throat real quick so you can hear me talk better. Hang on. Excuse me. That's better. As I've been working with teams of various sizes and helping to onboard new team members and get them trained and everything, I go to meetups and I've talked a lot to the developer community. And a few years back, some of the people I worked with said, "Hey, there's this new job title called evangelist, and that seems like a fit for you. You love talking about being a developer. So why don't you do that?" And that kind of started my journey into using my development skills for developer relations. It's a very new field. I'm so sorry, let me clear my throat again. Good thing I made coffee. It's a very new field. There's a total of one book on the topic, and that book is written by my friend Mary Thengball. It's a very good book. If you're interested in going deeper than today's session, I recommend it highly. We were able to get together for lunch a few weeks back in Brooklyn. Took her down to Brighton Beach and we had some good Russian food together, and she signed my copy and we're very proud of that. My son loves this book. It's got avocados on the front, and I don't know if you can see my camera. It's got a green light, so I think you can. This is the first search result in the search for DevRel on the O'Reilly platform, and here I'm holding a physical copy. And the avocado is the symbol for developer relations professionals. And if we have time, we'll kind of go into a little bit about why. But with one book on this topic, you can tell the job role or the field of developer relations, it's very fresh, very new. So looking at Mary's definition of what is developer relations, let me go into her description here and we'll talk a little bit about this. So Mary writes, at its foundation, the purpose of developer relations, or DevRel, is to build relationships with the developer community. DevRel professionals act as a liaison between their company and the developer audience, who are typically the end users of the product. I'll add a note here that that's not always the case, and we'll talk a little about that. Whereas most professionals have the best interests of the business at the front of their minds, driving their day-to-day decisions, DevRel professionals have the best interests of the community as their driving factor. They, of course, care about the success of the business as well. It is, after all, what pays the bills. But they understand that if the community is happy and successful as a result of using the product, the business is far more likely to succeed as well. I think that's beautifully put. And it's anytime there's a new field or new job role that emerges, it's always good to nail it down with that definition. So I feel that this is the official definition of DevRel. So why is this rising up in the business world now? Excuse me. One of the leaders in the development community, Bob Martin, he says that every 5 years the number of developers doubles. And that means that every 5 years, half of all developers in the world have almost no experience. And this is beginning to be a problem that has existed for many years, but it's coming to the forefront now. In past years, there may have been a sort of an aura or stigma around developers, like we were the geeks, we were in the back room or in the basement. The business leaders were up on the top of the building and they were in suits and making things happen, and the nerds were just kind of hidden behind the scenes. Well, that's no longer either the truth or even the stigma around geeks and nerds. We're coming into our own. We're ruling the world these days. If you can write code, you've got a lot of power, not just in the terms of what you can create, but the ways that you can impact society and indeed the world. So companies that are able to go through digital transformation have to do more than just transform their business into a company that is oriented towards software. people say every company is a software company these days, but every software company has developers and relies upon developers. So making sure that you're getting a good connection with the developers that your company is serving and having a good relationship with the developers inside of your company as well. These relationships are very important. Developers are the future. Everything we do is increasingly dependent upon technology. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, the developers are the ones who are responsible for that technology. Not only is it important for the well-being of a company, but also the companies that are able to serve developers well and meet developers' needs well, they will thrive. It's affecting the bottom line of corporations, and there's real business value in getting this right. So who has the attention of developers? It can be a very interesting thing to find what goes viral in the world of development. We've got our own sort of underground networks and different places that we chat, little dark caves that we crawl into and meet with each other. And because developers are so frequently familiar with the marketing tools that we implement for companies to have good visual metrics and everything, we often surf the web with ad blockers and different things disabled. And you can't see us sometimes, we're invisible. But we know how to find each other, and there are different networks where developers will communicate. Some of the old ones like IRC, there's a Freenode IRC server where you can find people that you're like, oh wow, this guy's here or this girl's here. They're speaking at conferences, they're writing books, and I can talk directly to them. This is amazing. There's news sites. Hacker News is the one that I most frequently visit. It's put out by Y Combinator. It doesn't even have Hacker News in the URL. It's just news.ycombinator.com, I believe. And that's something that you'll find the latest technology headlines and the chat in there. Very basic website. It doesn't even look fancy at all, but when you get into those chats, you're talking to some of the people that are moving and shaking the world. Being able to move in those circles, you kind of have to be on the inside. You have to be a developer and understand the language and the motivations. So finding out who has the attention of the development community is a very powerful and effective way for a company to begin to form a strategy around developer relations. And the most important, I believe, is who's meeting the needs of developers. If you give me two companies, both offering a service or a product that is oriented towards me as a developer, the one that makes it easy for me, the one that has good documentation, the one that has a friendly person at a booth at a conference, the one who has someone speaking at a conference that makes sense, that opens my eyes to a new idea or new topic or new concept, or just explains some basics that I needed to refresh. Those people have my attention, and if they're meeting my needs, that's where not only my attention, but also all of the money that comes behind that attention is driven in that direction. And I don't just mean the budget of a developer and what's in my wallet, but the influence of a company that says, hey, David, you're in charge of building this. What do you need? And I say, I need this, this, and this. Those things get funded. Those things get approved. And the people that are meeting the needs of the developers are the companies that are getting those approvals and increasing and reinforcing their customer base. So developers are the future, but community is the present. I was talking about how developers get together and meet and discuss things. We go to meetups and we sit right next to our competitor. We don't care. The business is, of course, important to us, but what we really care about is the technology. I mean, we truly love getting down under the hood of a computer and making it do what we want. And we share that information openly. You've seen the rise of the open source movement as we just give our code to each other because we see the value. When we work together, a rising tide lifts all ships. So we freely share information, and in the communities where we share that information, you'll find the opinions that we form around frameworks and programming languages and service providers to be very influential. And you can see the value in, for example, politics of having public relations. A press release or putting out a fire if someone's reputation is on the line, that can make or break the future of a campaign or a politician or a movement. The same is true in the world of development. Everyone's got an opinion about something and everyone wants to talk about it. And the way that that tide shifts can really influence the ability for a startup or an established company to persist in the market. So why do we gather? Well, we want to experience what other people are doing and learn from it. We want to share what we're doing and get other people excited about it. And we want to find support when we need help. We're stuck on a problem and we're like, who can I turn to? I mean, I've got the documentation for this thing right in front of me, but I don't know where to go. That can be everything from technology down to HR inside of your company. If you hire a developer and they're like, I don't know where to file for my paid time off, that's not a great relationship with the developer. Making sure that they know where to report, who to report to. These are all things that go into the holistic developer experience. So when we talked earlier about how the definition of developer relations can really focus on a company that provides services to developers, that's not always the case. You'll see companies that are hiring dedicated roles for developer relations professionals for the sole purpose of recruiting, because recruiting talent is an expensive and time-consuming endeavor. And so having someone go to a meetup and give a talk about WebAssembly or Rust or React or Angular, Flutter, when you have these conversations and you attract the interest and the attention of the development community, people say, oh, cool, I want to work at this company. They get it. They understand things. They know what's going on. They're using cool toys. I want to play with those toys. So even if the only reason to have an interest in developer relations is just finding talent, there's a wide spectrum of needs that are met by having a dedicated role or a dedicated effort in that space. Where do we gather? Well, obviously, we are right now all over the world, and this is very common to have gatherings where we share ideas and share thoughts and information, such as we are right now, from all over the planet. But you'll find frequently that people will go to meetups in the real world and sit in a room together, and it's a very valuable thing to get together in the same space. Right now I'm in Denver and it's snowing outside, and it's got a totally different feel than when I was sitting in the same room with Giannis and we were in New York, and being able to walk around together, that three-dimensional meet space, that's a really valuable thing. So you find those groups gathering together and people standing up and volunteering their time to just share what's on their mind or share a victory that they had in their development journey. And that's really a super important place for companies to be. Your employees or you yourself can gain so much just by letting it float past you, even if you don't understand everything that's being talked about. If you find one new thing to Google, it's worth getting together in the real world and sitting through a technical session where people are sharing these ideas and exchanging with each other. So one of the very difficult things in developer relations is, as a new field, there's not the established measurements that we would normally see. Marketing is so simple to measure because it's been around a while, and these growing pains are behind us in the world of marketing. Sales, if you see big piles of money, you're like, yay, sales is working. If you don't, you're like, something's wrong. Well, how do you measure developer relations? Because again, the DevRel focus is not on meeting the business goals inside of the company. It's on meeting the developers' goals outside of the company. How do you measure that? I've worked in several different companies, and now I have several different clients, and each one has its own unique position and its own space. But the one thing that you can always find somewhere is someone is receiving value. Now, in a company that serves developers, then okay, the developers should be receiving value. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes the management of a corporation is receiving value because they get to look good. They checked a box. They signed up for a service, but the developers are pulling out their hair because they're like, why did my boss sign me up for this service? It's the worst. It doesn't even, use the same tools that I use. I can't make them work together, and they're just going crazy. So when you identify who is receiving value and you make sure that you align that with who should be receiving value, This is one of the core principles that I think helps companies to be successful in general, and also specifically to this new space of DevRel. Identifying who is receiving value is very important. Who is the expert? A lot of companies will just push off the responsibility of being an expert to somebody else. It's very easy to do when you're contracting. You say, I will pay you this much money and you deliver this much value. And then it's, you've moved the line to where it's like, okay, that contracting company is now responsible to be the expert. But when you've got customers, do you tell your customers they're supposed to be the expert in technology? I mean, we trust that many of them will be, but a lot of times we need to step up and take responsibility and say, we are the experts in technology. Part of the service, part of the product that we deliver as a company is to be the expert. And that sometimes means hiring someone to be that expert, someone that knows what they're talking about, someone that knows the pain points of whatever it is that you're doing in your business, that can be the liaison, that can be the go-between, that can be the expert that says, I have answers, I have solutions, and I hear your problems, and I can do something about them for you. And as we take that responsibility internally to our corporations, to our business, to our products and services, we are meeting needs and we are delivering additional value that's essential to long-term growth and survival. Can we measure a vacuum? A lot of times the important activities that we should be doing to make sure that our developers are receiving everything that they need, they're not on our radar. And when we try to measure DevRel, we say, oh, maybe we can count the number of clicks. Well, that's a marketing measure. Or we can count the income to the company. Well, that's a sales measurement. So if there's a missing space, we can't measure that vacuum. What we can do is make sure that we've got a complete set of all of the expectations that we want to get out of the activities of DevRel. And then when we've eliminated that vacuum, we can measure things. So what works? Alignment of focus top down. I'll take a sip of my coffee here real quick. So from the top down, it's very important that the CEO be very understanding and excuse me, very supportive of the mission of developer relations in the corporation. If it doesn't go all the way to the top, it will fall apart. There will be a lot of misalignment. There will be a lot of issues. So from the top C-suite down, you have to make sure that you are having a conversation around the motivation behind giving attention and focus and time to developer relations for the right reasons and with the right expectations. Developers are engineers. We build things, we make things work. We may also have some soft skills or some cross training. We may be good at marketing or public presentations and public speaking and making videos and other things, but ultimately when you describe a developer, you're talking about someone that makes things work. And that's why I believe what works in DevRel is starting with your goals from an engineering perspective, not from a marketing perspective or sales perspective or these other business interests, but looking at what is your engineering space and where can you build goals in that space. And then filling the gaps in your developer experience. If you have great documentation, but you don't have any examples of using your product, if you have maybe a company that doesn't serve developers but has developers, and those developers inside of your company don't have something that they need, find those gaps, find those spaces, and what works is to fill those. That's a very effective first step. It's low-hanging fruit there. And then build things. That's what developers do. That's what your developer relations focus should be. And then talk about what you've built, because that's where it really, that's where the rubber meets the road there. And then go the extra mile. This would mean if you've built a product or service and you can, on top of that, build an API that just shares free data with the world, you're going to attract attention from developers. You're going to attract a lot of positive energy from that. So, building things that are just meant to be nice, be a giving, sharing part of the developer community, that's very effective. So what doesn't work? Reporting to marketing. Marketing has its own goals, and while the efforts of developer relations can benefit marketing vastly, we can write blog posts that are just getting, marketing goals left and right. Reporting to marketing as the line item that you're in their department, you might as well just hire a technical marketer. That's not DevRel, it's technical marketing. Same is true of sales. If I'm good at a programming language and I can help in sales because I know that language, that's great, but it's technical sales. It's not necessarily DevRel. And putting the cart before the horse. If I'm going to speak at a conference and because of that talk, I get ready to talk at the conference, that's the wrong motivation. I should be building things, and then once I've built something and I have something to talk about, then I'm ready to go to a conference and say, hey, look at this thing I built. And fading into the background of internal support. This has happened to me several times. It's so easy because you've got experience, because you've got background in development to just become IT for your coworkers. If you're focused on DevRel, you're definitely going to be nice and help people, but you've got your own mission to focus on. So I've been doing this for companies inside of the corporation where I'm an employee, and I was recently asked would I be willing to do this as a contractor, and I thought, well, that raises some really interesting challenges. I said yes, and I've added several clients, and I've been learning as I go how to provide developer relations services from outside of a company. And it's very difficult. Most companies, I would say, should hire somebody to be inside of the corporation because they will get so much exposure and experience from being inside of the company that that will bubble up into everything they do. But I'm working on solving these problems, and I'm open to conversations with the larger community of developer relations professionals and businesses to ask the question, what is it that you are doing in DevRel today, and what are your goals? So that's where I'm at personally. And if you are interested in having a further conversation, in most places I'm at David Can Help on Twitter, on Keybase, several places like that. So if you'd like to continue chatting, I would love to have that conversation. So thank you so much, and I'd like to turn it back to Giannis, and maybe we can have some discussion and Q&A time.
That's right. Thank you very much, David. Very interesting. Some good stuff in there on the importance of developer relations. I particularly like the point that Kerry also commented on, that it's such a powerful way to look at the growth of developers. When you think of it, that in 5 years' time, half of the developers will have no experience, and then I think another point that I wrote down was also on just the value alone in attracting talent, because developers are in high demand everywhere in the world. So with that said, I wanted to just open the floor to questions. Doesn't have to be questions, could also be just comments, reflection. Do remember to unmute, and then David is still here for a couple of more minutes. So who wants to go first?
I have
Let's
a
see.
question. This is Carrie.
Hello,
So
Carrie.
I'm not a developer, but I like how you're talking about this, and I think this relates across disciplines that are, especially the ones that are fairly new in the world and other people don't understand. So I find it interesting that you are a consultant. So just wondering how that works. What is the work that you're doing, since you're coming from the outside rather than the inside and building something from inside?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was having this conversation with Mary. She is not a developer. She is a community manager, so she comes from a perspective of more focus on community building. And I was telling her the reason I chose the name for my company, DevRelopers, it's the word DevRel, but it feels like you're saying developers, because kind of back to the idea of starting with engineering goals. That's something that I think is really core. So what I'm doing right now for my clients is building things. And the reason that I'm building those things is not to move their product forward, but rather I'm building things that will move the development community forward. So for example, if you take a service provider, I used to be the chief evangelist at FileStack, and so their engineering team is building the service of FileStack, and my goal was not to help the engineers build FileStack. My goal was to build software that demonstrates what it's like to be a client. So when a developer comes to FileStack, they get two things. One thing, they get the service that their engineers are building, and another is they get my code, which is an example of using that service.
Thanks. That's interesting.
All right.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a developer to be in developer relations. You just have to be in relations and relate to developers. So there are other ways to meet those needs, but the way I'm focused is on that engineering based. It plays to my strengths.
So let me pass it on to Sarah, who's a product manager in the UK. Oh, back on mute. Let's see if we can get this to
Sorry.
work. So let's see. Any further questions? I can pick on some. Nate, who I see also on the call, or Guy Purcell, any of you who are working with developers, any insights or reflections you want to share?
No, I can share a little bit of my experience because it relates quite well to what you're saying, actually.
Thank you, Sam.
Basically, I'm working as tech lead at AXA, and we develop open source software as well, and we develop inner source software. And we also do what you have described of not only developing an API and letting people decipher how they have to work with it, but by providing example of code and reference implementation and full implementation sometimes that people can just take off the shelf and just use. So yes, I think it's very important if you want to be able to communicate well within the company to provide this kind of services. So I'm a little bit biased because I'm on the technical side of things and I'm developing every day. So I'm more developer than somebody outside of that area. But I think indeed it is important to have that.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of interesting things that people are doing in DevRel. Probably the leader in this industry is Twilio. They make the API for doing SMS services. They built a game. It's called Twilio Quest, and you play this game and you earn points and t-shirts and stickers and credit on the platform. So developer relations is really exploring new ways of connecting with developers, and that's a very exciting space.
All right, David. I think that's all for now. Thank you very much, Sam, Carrie. Thank you everybody else who participated, who was a part of it. But of course, a big thank to you, David, for finding the time in your morning in snowy Denver to share your insights. As promised in the beginning, we'll share the slides, we'll share the recording, and you'll also have the contact details. So if you want to continue the conversation with David, please feel free to do so. Thank you, everybody.
Cool. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.